Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "The future lies with those wise political leaders who realize that the great public is interested more in government than politics." In exactly 2 weeks, voters will choose the next government of the Bahamas. The weight of our votes impacting our lives for the next 5 years. Hello and welcome to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. One of the most important privileges we have as Bahamian citizens is the right to vote and choose who will represent us going forward. As a result, it is important to get to know your candidates and see and understand how their party intends on taking the country forward. Tonight on The Record, we debate with representatives of the Grand Commonwealth Party, the Democratic National Alliance, and the Free National Movement. Just to be clear, all parties were invited. We're going to delve into the topics that will affect the future development of the Bahamas. My guests include Yorick Sands, candidate for Central and South Andros from the Grand Commonwealth Party, Dr. Carnille Farquharson, candidate for Mount Moriah for the DNA, and Drumeco Archer, the candidate for Fort Charlotte from the FNM. Stay tuned. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. The ocean economy is valued at $1.5 trillion a year. Over 350 million jobs are related to fisheries, and aquaculture is known to be the fastest growing sector for food. On the other hand, having a green economy allows for pollution reduction, greater social security, and helps to bolster the 3 pillars of social development: planet, people, and profit. As a tourism-based economy with offerings of sun, sand, and sea, our future leaders will have a lot on their plate as they move toward greater sustainability through the economy. My guests for this segment tonight of On the Record are Dr. Carnille Farquharson. She's the candidate for the Mount Moriah constituency for the Democratic National Alliance, and Mr. Drumeco Archer. He's a candidate for the Fort Charlotte constituency representing the Free National Movement. Welcome to On the Record.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to be here.
So we have decided, as we are just 2 weeks away from the election, to have a bit of a candidates roundtable for this edition of the show. It's a short run and we haven't had a lot of time to meet candidates, but we wanted new candidates. We want to diversify our guests. We open it up to all of the parties. You, of course, accepted along with one other. So thank you for coming on. So very quickly, this 15 seconds. Drumeco, I'm going to start with you. Why did you decide to get into politics? We know you from your position in the B3As and track and field, but what was it that drove you to get on the ticket this time?
I don't know if there was anything that, there's not any one thing that brought me here, except that I think your work speaks for itself. I have always been entrenched in the community through Junkanoo, through sports, and through just sharing and offering service. And it was an easy gravitation once I was offered an opportunity to simply say, I have no choice but to continue the work that I do.
Dr. Well, we can't talk about Junkanoo because then we can get in a problem.
Well,
that,
that's
you know,
like
we
religion,
said
right?
being biased, yes.
Except for the Valley Boys who are my
don't
friends.
bring it up, we can get in a problem. Dr. Farquharson, same question. You know, and I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I know these two individuals very well for a long time. And it surprised me a bit when both of you came forward, but Dr. Farquharson, what was it that, you know, why did you answer that call that people say is always there to get into politics?
Right, yes. And I think for the most part, just as Mr. Bolek Drumeco, being involved, very much involved in the community and wanting to see even more community progression, community networking and collaboration going on. And I just felt that I can be a lobbyist for improving, that. Several other reasons, but one other one was in terms of youth and youth development. And feeling that we need to put more emphasis on grooming our youth to be able to go off and come back and rebuild our middle class and keep our country going at a certain level.
And I have to say, you know, it is heartening for me to see the diversity of candidates this time around. I mean, it's stacked full with so many candidates. And so for me, that's a step in the right direction. We're going to get into some issues now. The PAHO director in July mentioned that fully reopening the economy could impact the health of a place. Do you believe that the measures to get our economy back up and running are contributing to the spikes in COVID-19 cases that we see? Dr. Farquharson, I'm obviously going to begin with you.
Okay, well, speaking from a medical standpoint, having been in it for a while, it's always a bit of a battle and concern when public health is pitted against economics. And I shouldn't say pitted, but you know, you have to find the correct balance. And understanding that there has to be some economic revitalization in the sector, sorry, to get people back to work, get monies coming in, but knowing also that our healthcare sector really is at a state where it just can't handle a lot of the things required to balance off the opening of our economy, the opening of our borders. And so it's kind of like a bittersweet for me. I think that the opening is contributing, obviously, to it. One of the major things that we have going for ourselves as a country is that we're an island nation. We can close borders, we can monitor things. You know, people just can't come in and out as they want. And with the different islands, we can kind of control different things within the islands. We lost that advantage once the international border was opened.
Is the answer, though, closing our borders again?
I think one of the things that was recommended was in terms of opening the border, doing it in a more measured manner, okay? We have many islands that people can enter to directly, starting with just one port of entry for both air as well as sea arrivals, and putting all of the resources in those ports. Suggestion would have LPIA as the only port of entry for air travel, and Prince George Wharf as the only port of entry for sea travel. And this would include private yachts, all of those. And once you pass those to the satisfaction of the healthcare and government requirements, then that would have a little bit more control over how things are coming into the country. Drumeco
Archer, you represent the party that has been at the helm of government in this COVID crisis. We have reopened, the economy is moving again, but so are the COVID numbers. And there is always the discussion about, did we open too early? Have we done too much? Your take on this?
You know, they say damn if you do and damn if you don't. The reality is if we close our borders, the people suffer. Our economy is a single market economy that deals with tourism for the most part. And so when hotels close their doors, when taxi drivers cannot traverse the streets of Nassau with tourists, and when straw vendors can't sell a t-shirt or sell a straw bag, every single person in the country is affected by that. There's been an unprecedented number of people who are no longer able to pay school fees. And so the burden is enormous for the country. And I think it is a balancing act. And the reality is, the only way we can get back to normalcy is through the promotion of vaccination. And I believe that vaccination is a matter of choice. However, we understand that that is one of the most mitigating, one of the tried, tested, and proven mitigation of the prevention of this virus and getting us back to good health. And so, if you close the economy, it's one issue, and if you open the economy, then there's an explosion of COVID. I don't know if closing the borders really helps, because we have multiple island nations. We have multiple islands that we have to service. And it isn't just New Providence. Mm-hmm. When we close the border, we sever our ties from Abaco and Eleuthera and the Berry Islands and everywhere else. And so I think that what has happened in more recent times and the reception of it is commendable for this administration, and that is getting people vaccinated.
So let's talk economy now. You, in your response, very eloquently laid out that obviously reopening the economy is tied to the survival and the basic survival of our people. Are you satisfied that the economy was opened properly and that everybody is able to benefit? One of the criticisms levied against this administration is that there are a segment of people who are benefiting from all of this and others aren't. How do you respond to that?
I believe that when you look at it in the most pragmatic way, I have to say that the government has done all that it could to consider, as foreseeably as they could, all of the scenarios. The reality is that you don't capture all of them. And I think that the government has made quick adjustments when they recognized, when they would have recognized that, hey, I didn't consider that. And maybe I need to readjust the measures. This was such a fluid thing that you can only say, you all should have done that only after the fact. No one knew that we would have had a Delta variant. No one, we thought that we had it under control, and then all of a sudden we had a stronger strain where death occurred in the most aggressive way. And so for me, I believe that the government continues to do its work. I think the government is not a perfect government. It is not a government that's fixed on its policy, particularly with respect to healthcare. And so under the leadership of Hubert Alexander Minnis, I believe that he's shown resilience and some foresight. And some would have responded. I think that the real problem is that many just have resisted irresponsibly.
I have to give Dr. Farquharson now an opportunity to respond. Let's talk, if you can, the economy and the criticism. The question was the criticism too, that some are benefiting over others.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in terms of when you're opening the economy, obviously there was still a lot of restrictions on small businesses in terms of their ability to function. Things that had to be put in place for them that some of them were not able to afford. Obviously, those businesses that were able to put things in place more quickly and had the resources to do it, those were able to be open and sustain themselves. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the smaller businesses either discontinued functioning, or they continue to struggle at this time. So in that sense, yes, there are businesses who are obviously going to do better than some others, just because of how the economy was open and the targeting of these different policies as well.
Yeah.
So one of the things that this pandemic, it showed us quite a few things, but one of the things I think that is blaring is the need for us to diversify the economy. I mean, there is this over-reliance on tourism, and when that stopped, everything stopped along with it.
Right.
If given an opportunity to lead, what types of things would the DNA be looking to do to diversify the economy so that, when we find ourselves in a similar position, down the road, and it's going to happen again.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
What do we do? How do we make sure that we don't find ourselves with this over-reliance now on government handouts almost for us to survive.
Right, and so exactly. So in terms of our economic diversification, two of the main ones that the DNA, well, there are three really, the blue, the green, and the orange economy. The blue and the green, we think, could have been instituted during this particular period of time. And for both of them, the green economy being, sustainable use of land resources, and the blue economy being that sustainable use of the ocean resources, while maintaining healthy ecosystems in both of them. They're both very important for production of food. And that's one of the things that was very apparent during this pandemic, and even during previous hurricanes and coming hurricanes, is that we're very limited in terms of our own food production and getting food, and we're too reliant on bringing foods into the country. And so this would have been a time to try and develop our food security with agriculture, plant, as well as the sea. During this time as well, a lot of Bahamians actually got into backyard farming, and their mindset was changing towards agriculture as something more sustainable that we need in our country, and it would have been the perfect opportunity to fully invest in it. Now, I know that some businesses, both farms as well as some fisheries, did receive funding during this time. I think the end of last year, some $5 million was invested into these companies. What I wish was also brought out, though, is what these companies are producing, the amount they're producing, how is it being incorporated into our national food plan in terms of long-term sustainability. Going forward, we have to cut down our import food bill, and the DNA has looked to plans in terms of decreasing that at least 50% over the next 5 to 10 years.
We're going to, Drumeco Archer, was this a missed opportunity for us to diversify the economy?
I believe that we're talking about long-term development, but in the immediate administration period, I believe that the government has done some historic things. BAIC, under the leadership of Michael Pintard, has really promoted sustainable development through food resources. I believe that we've produced more produce that were made available to the country than ever in the history of the Bahamas. When you consider the promotion of backyard farming, that's been an initiative of the government of the Bahamas, this administration. But more than that, I think that we have looked at diversification, economic diversification, far more broadly than that. Within 1 year, we have already spent $70 million on the promotion of small business development, small and medium-sized businesses. And if you look at our manifesto of 2021, which has just been released yesterday, you would be happy to see that we are investing $250 million in small and medium-sized businesses over the next 5 years. That's $50 million every year to promote and to spur on these new industries. And what is more, you have young women and young men who we're focusing on, not young men, youth, where we've earmarked $25 million in the promotion of small businesses. That also impacts people who are paralyzed, who can carry on home-based businesses. I know someone today who is on the street. His name is Donnie Martin. He sells face masks, and he's on the streets every day. I can't wait for him to take advantage of some of these opportunities, because we're not just looking at regular working people. We're looking at those persons who are defenseless. This economy is for everyone, and we have to ensure that everyone benefits. Okay. And that's the real focus of this government.
We're going to take a break real quick, but before we go, I want to, Drumeco, I'll start with you. Is it time for us to realistically and honestly address minimum wage and raising minimum wage, and in the context of there is the growing sentiment that we are losing our middle class? Is it time for us to really seriously address raising minimum wage with a view that the middle class is under threat? We don't have a lot of time.
Okay, so those are two competing issues. I'm not sure whether one is in any correlation with the other. Yes, there's always an appetite for a discussion on minimum wage. I don't believe that the middle class is shrinking. I do believe, though, that our lower class needs help. And the focus of this government is to identify the root of the problems. This is not a handout government. It's a government that has pinpointed issues such as education, recidivism, teenage pregnancy. And when we look at the social ills of the country and looking at the welfare of the country, we then begin to address the systemic problems. It is not it's not an enlarging lower class. It is identifying problems that will enrich them in the future.
We have got to go to a break, but Dr. Farquharson, I'm going to ask you now to have the last word on just that, and rightfully so. Minimum wage, shrinking middle class, two different issues, but certainly all affect the economy at the end of the day. Do we seriously need to address this issue of minimum wage, and is that middle class shrinking as some would say it is?
We definitely need to increase the minimum wage. It has to be a gradual process because the cost of living in the Bahamas has skyrocketed over the number of years, and our middle class is shrinking because people are making the same, but the expenses are up. And we're also losing a lot of our younger population going off to school, not coming back, or seeking opportunities elsewhere. So that's been happening for decades now, and it's not changed at this point. And so being able to gradually increase to a livable wage and find ways to decrease the cost of living within the country is definitely necessary at this point.
We're going to take a break in the show. Due to social distancing, we're going to have to move some people in and out. We can't have everyone on the set. So Dr. Farquharson, we're going to excuse you for a moment. Mr. Archer, you stay on. We're going to bring on a candidate who represents a brand new party. We found out about him on nomination day. Don't go anywhere. We've got more on the record right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back. You're watching On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Tonight, our continuing discussion with candidates from the Grand Commonwealth Party, the Bahamas Democratic Movement, and the Free National Movement. Now, COVID-19 was the global pandemic that gave the Bahamas a major wake-up call, leaving the country in shambles in many ways as the world closed down in a matter of minutes, it seemed. As a result, once again, we're back to square one. How can we diversify our economy through tourism and other means to sustain us? Here to discuss tourism and small business development and a few other things in this segment, my guests include Mr. Yorick Sands. He is a candidate for the Central and South Andros constituency representing the Grand Commonwealth Party, and Mr. Drumeco Archer, who is with us again representing the Fort Charlotte constituency for the Free National Movement. Mr. Sands, welcome to On the Record. Congratulations on the formation of the new party. As I said, we found out about you all on nomination day. So you've got two questions up front.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about this party. Why did you choose to really reveal yourself, I would guess, on nomination day? And then, of course, what drew you to the party and this whole race to get to Parliament?
Well, it's really good to be here. Happy for the opportunity. Before I continue, I want to include Mangrove Cay. You mentioned Central Andros, South Andros. I can't leave out Mangrove Cay.
The people in South Andros will have my head.
That's
I apologize.
correct. That's correct. But the Grand Commonwealth Party, I believe, is growing really fast. Is about to be a very powerful entity in this country. Even though we appear to be late in the race, I believe many people are taking notice to the fact where many independents and even members affiliated with major parties from the past or the past few weeks have been having discussions and basically trying to come under our umbrella. And so we're really, really excited about that. Part of the reason we decided to come in the race at this point, and it was really calculated, part of our strategy. We wanted to be a little bit different from what the other third parties or smaller groups were doing. We wanted to come out and appear to be different. And so really from day one, we had our calculations built on coming out, launching, and getting the attention of the nation right around the time when the Prime Minister will ring the bell. And so it may not be the best strategy in terms of how some people may look at it. Mm-hmm. However, we saw it as a strategy that would be different, and we thought that having that different strategy will cause people to look at us a certain way. But the idea was to have the strategy with the element of surprise, shock, and on that day to come out, we were hoping with 39 candidates, and we really had 39 candidates lined up, ready to go to present to the nation on day one. And so, but coming from there, despite being a bit late, the idea was to come out and be really, really powerful.
Well, you certainly got our attention. It was a brilliant move. However it pans out, we'll have to look back and really assess that. But congratulations and welcome to the race. Drumeco, I'm going to start out with you, but this certainly relates to our newest guest. But let's talk about Family Island development. Our islands on the surface really have been neglected in many ways by successive governments. A lot of our islands still have an untapped potential. As you and the FNM now seek to be re-elected, what is the plan really to develop our islands and the economies of these islands? They're all unique and different and special, but what can our family islanders suspect should the FNM get a second term?
We have already begun doing that work. In this administrative period, there has been so much that has been done infrastructurally, paving the way, making it possible for Bahamians like me and you to be able to visit the family islands as if we're living in a first world country. The infrastructure is first class, and when you look at the airports that have been developed, the roads and the bridges and water in Cat Island, we say that we're moving in the right direction. The other dimension to family island development is providing access to Bahamians all around this country who hail from Andros to Eleuthera to Inagua and everywhere in between. And that is to provide them with land access. I think that the government of the Bahamas has really made that a primary focus, because unless we can develop real estate, then we really can't develop family islands. When you consider the lighthouse development in Eleuthera, that is an anchor project that paves the way for a migration of people back to the family islands. That is the initiative. The diversification of our economy rests in the hands of how we develop those family islands.
Yorick Sands, Drumeco would have mentioned water in Cat Island. While that seems
so fundamental, right?
Fundamental. It's 2021, and we just talk about water in a family island. You represent or you're seeking to represent a constituency which is still very undeveloped. If given the opportunity, what will your party do to turn that around and to address this, decades-old problem that we have?
Reality is unfortunate that for many, many years, we actually transported water from the island of Andros. Still today, not all of the communities in Andros have running water.
But we were taking water from Andros for New Providence.
But still we don't have running water in some communities in Andros.
Wow.
My entire campaign in South Andros, Mangrove Cay, Central Andros, is based on many years of family island neglect. That is the message I'm taking door to door. The people of Andros, they're receiving that message. That is a powerful message, a factual message. And I think the evidence from that neglect, really from both major parties, as I said for many years, evidence is there in the fact that schools have been closing down for many years, churches closing down for many years, even infrastructure. For example, right now, I know my colleague here mentioned roads, etc., basic infrastructure. But if you were to take a ride right now in South Andros, Central Andros, Mangrove Cay, all three areas of my constituency, you'd recognize that the roads are really, really terrible. And it appears though almost every time it is time for the election, members of the two traditional parties, the major parties, would come and sign a contract, basically weeks before an election. But we're saying that in order for us to grow, develop, and really take our proper place as a community, we need our politicians to now give full-time attention to our communities. It appears though many of our politicians of the past have become Nassau-centric. And unfortunately, even when we have our family island representatives, many of whom actually grew up on the family islands, it appears once they reach Parliament, reach New Providence, the focus become New Providence. And so family islands have been neglected. That is a fact. And also we see the population drift. While the overall population of the country increase, the population of the family islands decrease. But the reality is we have to put great attention there because the future of the country is really in the family islands. So much potential. And I'm really, really happy to that for my party. I'm actually the shadow cabinet minister for tourism. I thought it was important that that be a person who is a family island candidate. And also, even better that it is the candidate for Andros, South Central Andros and Mangrove Cay.
So I want to continue on with this discussion because I think it opens the door to so many things. Population shift. There is a particular key in the south that has 10 people living on it.
That's correct.
10 people live in Long Cay, I understand. What are we going to do to stem the tide as well as revitalize those islands, not just with population, but with tourism and with economies? While infrastructure is important, we're building roads, you can put in water, but who's going to ride on those roads? Who's going to use the water if it's not attractive?
That is the very, very reason why we are placing such a strong emphasis on small business development. If you don't have work, people aren't going to stay. And so we're trying to train up people and to stimulate economies, not just in New Providence, but also throughout the family islands, by getting people back into those islands and developing those islands in the way that we envision it. Right now, we are working on a $20 million road development project in Andros that addresses the issue of potholes and impassable streets that allows commerce to take place and flourish. I'm excited about that.
But do you, though, accept the criticism that this contract or these contracts are signed as elections loom? And, you know, whatever the reason is, it gives the appearance as if you don't care about us until it's time for our vote.
The F&M party has never stopped working. This is not a calculated thing that we've done. Our record would show that we have done infrastructural works from day one until the bell rang. It happens that there are still projects that are incomplete, that are in tow for us to continue our work in the next administration. And I can tell you that in South Andros, D'Angelo Ferguson, a young, brilliant guy, will do the work and will continue to work in South Andros. I'm looking forward to that.
Given the opportunity, if your party is at the helm, if you are elected and you get into the House of Assembly, what is the plan to bring people back to those islands, to make a South Andros attractive to a Jerome Sawyer who may want to go and live and work there?
The Grand Commonwealth Party has a major initiative called the Move Back to the Island Initiative. Andros, Long Island, Megon, all of these family islands will benefit immensely from this particular initiative. And so at the base of this initiative is plans for employment, also housing, also recreation, because we find that employment is good, some other aspects are good as well, but we also find that most of the family islands are a bit boring, really. And if you look at it, most of the young people in particular don't want to be in these family islands because they feel as though Nassau has more situations for recreation, etc. Excitement. And so we're looking at things like being creative. For example, in South Andros, we're looking at what we'll call a tourism hotel slash fishing college. Okay, and so basically, a hotel like that will be a hotel where everyone around the world who love fishing, whether it's on the flats with bone fishing, whether it's deep sea fishing, etc., they would know that that's the hotel where you would come for any kind of fishing, etc. But also tied to that is the training aspect, the college, where we train our young men and women using those same resources that the tourists would use, the boats, the diving equipment, etc. But we train them. We train our young people. So we now creating jobs, and we now in a better position to expand and accommodate a larger number of tourists, because one of the problems which exists in Andros right now is that the bonefish establishments, for example, they can only grow so big, maybe sometimes 6, 8, 10 rooms, etc., because they can't find sufficient guides. They can't find sufficient captains to take these tourists out. If it wasn't for that problem, the potential is there. If it wasn't for that problem, these businesses can be much bigger, they can do more marketing, and they can accommodate many more tourists simultaneously.
We're coming to the end of the segment, but I've got to get in this question. And gentlemen, I just want to say I wish that we were having these discussions, 4 years ago. Let's talk a little bit, though, while we're on the subject about environmental protection. While it is important to develop our family islands, while it's important to bring that development here, we possess as a country some of the greatest natural resources. We have protected areas. We have just beautiful, untouched landscape. How do we really begin to develop but also protect the environment? And I know within this administration, you all have come under fire for some of the projects that are on the table. You mentioned one, Lighthouse Point. We've got about a minute, but how are you going to really be able to push development but also protect the environment at the same time?
Yorick said something that was profound. He talked about moving back to the family islands, and I believe that the family islands is our greatest secret. When I came back from university with my first degree in economics, I heard the voice of Hilary DeVoe at BAIC, and immediately that's where I wanted to work, and there was where I began my professional career. And we talked about ecotourism. We talked about how we can live sustainably with our economies and promote stronger economies within those environments. And I go back to Andros, Central Andros, where Rupert Leedon was one of the leading bonefish lodges, where those lodges attracted people like Bill Clinton and George Bush and some of the most wealthy people in the world. We have to debunk this notion that being a fisherman is not a noble profession. We have to debunk this notion that working in vocational skills is not, there's no nobility in that. These are biblical professions that we must go back to the roots of and begin promoting.
We're running out of time, Yorick. I'm going to come to you. The question really on the table is, how do we push development while also protecting the environment? I know this is something that's very important to family islands.
The reality is we've been blessed with natural resources. And so you look at tours, etc. We can expand and move in a major way with tourism, etc., regarding tours, etc., without even, let's say, touching many of our special areas. For example, we have, hundreds of blue holes in Andros. We have caves and just natural areas where tourists can go have a good time, and also local tourism as well, because I know when we speak about tourism, we're thinking more about international tourism, but for local tourism as well. So there's just so much to be done without even bringing a backhoe or a tractor or something to destroy something, but then tied to whatever development we would do, especially when it comes to dredging, etc. Obviously, we have the national organizations that will help to guide and make sure we're not destroying, but then we have to develop a little more ties, some local organizations into that as well. Yeah. So like that, we even creating jobs through that venue as well.
Gentlemen, we've got to go to a break. Drumeco, your time is up with us. We're inviting our first. We wish you all the best.
You're kicking me out?
Well, you know,
time to go.
Like no pun intended.
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger said, I'll be back.
All right, sir.
Time up.
All the best to you. Mrs. Sands, we've got one more segment. We're going to bring our DNA candidate back. Thank you very much for a great discussion. Gentlemen, and I'm just going to say this, that we need more of this in our country. These are the kinds of discussions that we need to have. And let's have them on a political stage. Best of luck to you. We'll be back. Stay with us. More on the record right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back. You're watching On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. This is our final segment. We are in the midst of a discussion between candidates from some of the parties vying for election or to be elected in 2 weeks. Many Bahamians have claimed that the future generations will no longer have access to a place that they live. The selling of land and keys and islands have been an area of major controversy for a lot of Bahamians. Moreover, the topics of work permits, immigration, and more have been areas of concern for citizens for a long time. Here to talk more about these issues, Dr. Carnille Farquharson. She's the candidate for Mount Moriah for the DNA. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And also with us is the candidate for Central and South Andros and Mangrove Cay for the Grand Commonwealth Party, Yorick Sands. See, I got it right. Mangrove Cay are back in good stead.
That's right.
One of the issues that continues to be a sore point for Bahamians is this issue of land. And the notion that this land is not ours, that it's either too expensive, being sold to foreigners, or, it's just not available to us. Both of you are representing smaller parties but seeking to be in government. Dr. Farquharson, I'm going to start with you. If given the opportunity, how would the DNA address this issue of land use, of land ownership, even by Bahamians?
Right, yeah, so it's with previous changes in legislation, it made it more difficult for Bahamians to afford land because of the Removable Properties Act, where a lot of foreigners were coming in and buying properties, but it priced a lot of Bahamians out of the market, New Providence and other islands. And also with the concern about the, even granting access to Crown land, and then the other issue of what do you call it, in the family islands, the term I'm looking for is generation property, where Bahamians are unable to use that as any collateral. And then with Crown land, it's a difficult process in being able to access Crown land for both business, commercial, agricultural purposes. It's all concentrated in one office. With respect to Crown land, we intend to remove that out of the office of the Prime Minister and create a Crown Land Bureau. We're going to review all of the Crown land and have them divided into either commercial, agricultural, residential, different properties, and have a more easier process and more direct process to be able for Bahamians to be able to apply for these. With regards to the generation property, we'll look into legislation to allow for Bahamians to be able to find ways to use that as collateral to build, whether it's homes, businesses, and support other industries. And then generally in terms of low-cost housing availability for Bahamians, particularly in New Providence where the property prices are extravagant, we are looking into developing what we call eco home development, where it encompasses our green economy in terms of small homes that are very energy efficient. We're going to develop agriculture, backyard farming in these areas, improve the technology and access to consistent energy and other technology within these areas to make it easier for the average Bahamian looking to purchase a home to be able to afford it. And these will be low maintenance, because another issue is actually being able to maintain a home on a wage that is not even a livable wage.
I've got to now defer to Yorick Sands. You're from looking to represent a family island where land ownership and access, we do know, is a major issue. What is your party's position on this?
Yes, that is a major problem in many of our family islands, including on Andros. And so the Grand Commonwealth Party have the intention of putting in place some special but powerful committees with clear objectives. And we want to put timelines in place, because these discussions about land use and land being tied up, etc., these discussions were going on for quite some time. And so we also see the situation where family members who may want to live in Andros end up moving to other islands just because they may have ownership still not cleared, et cetera, et cetera. And so we would want to really study it and dig deep into it and just how that committee come up with answers. But again, to do it within a certain period of time. This is very, very important, because this affects not just residential properties, but also businesses, because we plan to expand and create large number of businesses in these island communities. And what we find is that no matter what kind of developments we want to come up with, we seem to run into roadblocks regarding land use. And so one thing that we plan to do as well is to cut more roads that would be away from the traditional or the established settlements. And so that will in itself create more available land as well for developments, whether recreation, housing projects, etc. But that's a major problem.
As we move forward, I want to tackle the issue of immigration and work permits as well. Yorick, I'm going to begin with you. This question starts with you. This continues to be another sore point for Bahamians. We have even been accused sometimes of being xenophobic. But how do we balance, in a modern society, the need for foreign workers with the interest of Bahamians? Because that seems to be where the disparity comes in. No country is an island unto itself. We live in a global community. Yet, there is the perception that the Bahamas is not always for Bahamians. How do we balance the two? And if given the opportunity, how are you going to address that?
Fact of the matter is, we have to always push the issue of Bahamianization. For decades, we've been trying to do that. We haven't been as successful as we should have been. But we must encourage Bahamian ownership and let Bahamians know that we believe in them. Certain things that Bahamians can do, we shouldn't be giving those opportunities to foreigners. However, there's also a saying that Bahamians don't like to share their country so much. But the reality is, with the type of expansion, with employment, etc., that we'll be looking at, we will have room for all Bahamians to have opportunities. And And when the situation is right, I think we can also include foreigners as well to a certain extent. We have a problem in the country, I believe all of us will agree, we kind of grew up with it, where we had foreigners tied to the Bahamas for many, many years. Many of them even born in the Bahamas. And still, you know, they basically don't really have a country.
Can't be recognized.
Can't be
Let's call it
recognized.
what it is.
Right.
Cannot
Yes.
be recognized.
And so
that's a whole other issue. But
Okay, okay.
I got you on there. But Dr. Farquharson, you work in a profession where I'm sure you see it every day. There is a large foreign workforce.
Yeah.
But how do we balance the two? We have needs as a country that can't be filled, but yet Bahamians are saying that there are not opportunities here for us.
I think one major area that can be put in place that's lacking now is the fact that, yes, I agree with you. There are some jobs that Bahamians at the time are not capable of doing. However, once we provide these work permits, part of that involves training Bahamians and ensuring that if we see that there is a need for these certain professions, jobs, whatever they are, for the long-term survival of the country, then it's incumbent upon the government to then review its labor policy, its personnel policy, and get Bahamians trained either by those persons who are in the country doing the job at this time or sending them off to get it done. And once their Bahamians are qualified and are able to do the job, then of course we don't need that foreign labor anymore. But this is going to be a continuous thing because the world is evolving. You're going to have different professions developing all the time. And so this is always going to happen. There has to just be better and more proper management of the system to ensure that we're training our Bahamians to be able to fill these roles continuously. And even starting at the high school level as well. If we're seeing that this need is here, you know, we need to diversify our educational system where there's not as huge a focus on academics alone, because academics alone do not run a nation. And we need to provide more career options, pathways from the high school level.
So very true. And we haven't even started talking about the issue of outsourcing services, because as we talked about even before the show started, in this COVID environment, people are going to start outsourcing jobs in other countries.
Exactly.
That are going to, so that's a whole other discussion. Final question, and it's got to be quick because we're just about out of time. My producer's going to be yelling at me in a moment. How do we break the two-party system in the Bahamas? As I look across the list of candidates, it is almost overwhelming for us to have to keep track of how many people have entered this election. And so obviously there is something that's driving people to get into politics and frontline politics. Both of you, Dr. Farquharson, very quickly to you, how do we break the two-party system?
Okay, traditionally the two-party system, that has changed over time. I think in terms of educating the electorate to becoming more actively involved in what's happening in the country, their part in determining their own future in this country, and looking more so at the person who is running and who they feel may serve a better interest for their community and the country as a whole, as opposed to looking at what we see as a party machinery, who the leader is, and voting one color or the other, but also in terms of even changing our system of governance, moving from this democratic monarchy to what the DNA is pushing for in terms of a democratic republic, a republic system, where individually, where the prime minister or president is elected separate and apart from who the leader of the party is, and this will give people more options.
Good point. Sir, you get the last word. How do we break the two-party system very quickly?
I believe the process has started already. And obviously the elections being called early kind of caught some parties off guard, including my party. But the reality is it begins with education, the mindset. That same message that I've been pushing in South Andros, Central Andros, and Mangrove Cay about family island neglect, that is a message there that works not just in Andros, but across all of the family islands. And we believe had we had time to push that message based on the plan we had, that this same election here, the Grand Commonwealth Party would have come close to sweeping the Family Island communities, the Family Island constituencies, and being well on the way to breaking this monopoly that the two major parties have. Grand Bahama too fits into that category in terms of neglect. We saw the suffering over a long period of time. But for Andros, this is Andros time. That message is clear and the process has started. People will see more and more that failures from the past, from the two major parties, is something that we have to now move away from and now become more open-minded to look at more options.
I want to say thank you for coming on. This has been a great, healthy discussion.
Yes.
I am always heartened when I see intelligent people who have great ideas offering themselves for political office. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
It's a short run, but it's going to be intense. So we wish you all the best. And come what may, I always say on September 17th, we will still be Bahamians. So let's remember that. That's going to do it for this edition of On the Record. I want to thank all of my guests for taking time to be with us. And of course, to my technical and production staff, thank you for making it happen. And of course, to you, our audience, special thanks for watching. We couldn't do it without you. We wouldn't do it without you. We'll see you next time. Same place, same time, right here on The Record.